Welcome to PWGC's Environmental Echo podcast. I'm your host, Paul Boyce, President and CEO of PWGC, and today we're going to be talking about a really, unique and interesting topic that we, at our firm, we get a lot of interest from outside folks, always asking, can we do this, do we do that? Always looking for help, wanting to know more and more about this, and that topic is carbon footprinting. And lately it's been a very hot topic, especially with a lot of things that are going on. And we've mentioned things on previous podcasts as far as like climate change and global temperature rises, sea level going up. All this stuff is related, but this is an aspect that like I said, it's garnered a lot of attention lately, and not just lately, in the last few years, I should say. And we're doing more and more of this work, and our clients are looking for bigger and better projects and ways to mitigate their carbon footprint, and their greenhouse gas emissions. But let me just give you guys a little bit of an overview of the topic. It's one of the many factors that contributes to the changes that we're seeing, and it's these greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide. There's also carbon monoxide, methane, a few other things, but CO2. That's one of the biggies that tends to trap heat in the atmosphere, which in turn leads to those rising global temperatures that I just mentioned. There's an intergovernment panel on climate change. The IPCC has a report that came out in August with the projection of global temperatures increasing, over the next couple of decades, which could lead to more catastrophic events. We've seen bigger and more intense storms, droughts, all sorts of things that get related to, temperature changes that are related to what we believe is carbon in the atmosphere, and that's why it's important to look at these things from a carbon footprint standpoint. The goal essentially is to prevent this rise in temperature by taking a look at this stuff. NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, has the National Center for Environmental Information, NCEI. They confirmed 2020 was one of the most extreme years historically in terms of these events. Just look at how recent that was. That was last year, not to mention the other extreme that was going on, a global pandemic, which we're still not out of. But to account for these impacts of greenhouse gas emissions, as a business, they've got to do first what's an assessment, and that's what I said is that carbon footprint. How much is your business or how much is your entity responsible for? What are you guys generating? Where's it coming from? All that fun stuff. The idea is to set a goal. You can't set a goal if you don't know where you stand in the first place. What I mean by goal is, how do we reduce our emissions? What do we get it down to? The initial assessment establishes that footprint we talked about for the entity and measures the total amount of greenhouse gases that are generated from the various activities that businesses perform, whether it's the actual work they do, it's transportation, people coming and going from the office, how far is the commute, what type of transportation they're using, what type of energy sources they're employing. But to discuss this interesting topic in detail today, I've got two of our folks from PWGC. I've got a branch manager and project engineer from Seattle. I've got Marie Mendes, and I've got a senior project manager, Doreen, both of whom work in PWGC's Environmental Compliance Unit. And they're both accomplished professionals and experienced in the realm of carbon footprinting and the assessment, carbon footprint assessment in a variety of different applications. So I'd like to welcome both of them. I know Marie, you've been with us for a long time. Doreen, we were talking this morning. You've went away for a little bit but came back. So together you've both been here for quite a while. Let's start with Doreen. Carbon footprinting. What's your initial thoughts on it?
Thank you for having me here today. Like you said, it's a very hot, exciting topic. Fortunately, this is a big thing I care about, so it's good to see industries and companies really taking an interest in keeping an eye on their carbon footprint and seeking out ways to improve themselves.
So along those lines, I briefly talked about, what it is, where it comes from, but can you dive a little deeper into, where does this carbon come from? What is a carbon footprint? Let's start with that. What is it? What does it measure?
Okay, so a carbon footprint, as you mentioned earlier, it's an estimate of greenhouse gases generated from burning fuel to heat your home, driving a vehicle, air conditioning. There's many facets that could contribute to your carbon footprint, but overall it's a measurement of the total greenhouse gases generated from whatever activity is being conducted in your home, your business, your industry.
So Marie, we were just talking about, carbon footprint. That's the nature. That's the whole topic of the show today. But we were just getting into, the definition of it. And Doreen was going over, fossil fuels and like it could be natural gas. I don't know, there's propane in there, types of things. Any type of fuel that you're going to burn. Obviously, a lump of coal. There's gasolines. There's fuel oils to heat your home. And what else? Is there anything else that we're missing that really contributes to these greenhouse gas emissions? What are some of the big contributors?
So when we're talking about carbon footprint, we are talking about the greenhouse gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. So any activities that your business or you yourself do that create or generate those greenhouse gas emissions is what we're talking about, carbon footprint. And it's divided into 3 scopes. So scope 1 is what you're directly emitting at your facility or your business. So that is the combustion of fossil fuels we just talked about. Any stationary combustion sources like your boilers, emergency generators, all types of fuels, and owned vehicles. And that's what we were just discussing, natural gas and all different fuels, propane, you name it, the whole gamut, what you're directly combusting. Facilities also have, fugitive emission releases of refrigerants that are at your facility. Anything that's really going out of the stacks of your building are going to be considered scope 1, and those are your emissions. Now, scope 2 are those emissions that are happening elsewhere but are influenced by you and are directly related to the procurement of heating and cooling your building. And the purchase of electricity. So that's scope 2. So you yourself, like if you had an on-site generator, you're generating electricity for your facility, that's your scope 1. But if you're purchasing electricity from the grid, that's your scope 2. So the power plant scope 1 is in turn your scope 2. Now scope 3 is everything else that your facility, all the business activities that you do that create greenhouse gas emissions. So from supply chain to the products that you purchase for your business and so forth. So it's all encompassing for scope 3. So scopes 1, 2, and 3 in a whole are your carbon footprint. However, it's predominantly scopes 1 and scope 2 when you're looking at it, and if you're volunteer reporting. And with scope 3, because it's so vast, we really look at select activities, those that are measurable and you can obtain accurate data. Data being, what your facility has to come up with some numbers. And in addition to that, are there reliable emission rates associated with that activity?
Oh, interesting. So, of all that stuff that you just mentioned, right, is one type of fossil fuel, say, worse than another? I mean, nobody's, in their office building burning coal or wood right now, but I mean, they're getting their fuel from maybe a diesel power plant or obviously hydroelectric, nuclear, or it could be wind, solar, whatever. But, of all those fossil fuels, which is maybe the worst type? Which one do you really want to avoid?
Definitely your fuel oils, and we have seen, number 6 go away, number 2, and now we're, a diesel, number 1 or number 2. So those heavier distillate oils are the ones that burn, I should say, I guess for lack of better terms, dirtier, not as clean. So fuel oil emits about 30% more greenhouse gases than natural gas. So
Okay.
those are the ones that we want to try to steer clear of if possible.
What's the alternative? What do we recommend to people to, avoid burning these fossil fuels?
Fuel switching. A lot of facilities have switched to natural gas only. There's now a momentum for electrification, electrifying buildings. There's a lot of conversation going around that since, and I know we'll discuss this at some point, but with New York State's CLCPA and trying to decarbonize the electric sector, if our power plants and utilities are supplying power from renewable energy, which is essentially zero greenhouse gas emissions by electrifying the building, will help you with your carbon footprint and will help facilities get to a zero emission or carbon neutral for their building. So that's, some of the methods that we discuss and some of the facilities are working with are going towards.
Oh, so the natural gas, methane, right? That's a little less, I don't know, has a smaller carbon footprint than the other stuff we talked about, like the diesels and the fuel oils?
Yes. So with about 80% in the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, followed by methane. Methane does have, I think Doreen mentioned it earlier, the global warming potentials of other greenhouse gases. So when we're talking about a carbon footprint, it's carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gases. So the other greenhouse gases, there's a global warming potential. So the common unit of measure for a carbon footprint is carbon dioxide equivalents.
Okay.
So methane is equivalent to so 1 ton of methane, depending on the global warming potential that you use. I think the current one right now is 25 tons. So 1 ton of methane is equal to 25 tons of carbon dioxide. So if you had
Wow.
1 ton of each, that would equal 26 tons of CO2e.
Whoa, that's more than I expected, for sure. Interesting. So, what types of entities require a carbon footprint analysis? At PWGC, we've worked with the various types of clients, but which ones have come to us requesting this? Which ones are actually required to do it? And how long have we been doing this for?
So, as you mentioned, not everybody is required to report, but since 2010, per US EPA 40 CFR, that's Code of Federal Regulations, Part 98, there are certain industries that reporting is mandatory, and those would include any industries with carbon emissions greater than 25,000 metric tons per year. And then, in addition to that, there would be manufacturers of vehicles and fossil fuel and industrial gas suppliers. So right now there are approximately 8,000 industries that are reporting annually as required. And anybody can look up that information on the EPA greenhouse gas reporting website. So at PW Grosser, we do mandatory reporting for healthcare facilities, and we do greenhouse gas assessments, voluntary assessments for a variety of industries, obviously including healthcare, bulk fueling. We've done some financial institutions, some manufacturing facilities. So it's a pretty wide variety.
It is a wide variety, and what's interesting is Marie brought up all those like scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. When you say that 25,000 metric tons, does that include all 3 scopes, or is it just limited to one? How does that work?
That would be scope 1. Certain industries that, as Doreen mentioned, are required to, and then subpart C are facilities that have stationary combustion sources. So
Okay.
those stationary combustion sources have to report the fossil fuels, and on an annual basis, if they're above 25,000 metric tons, they do need to report that. So we've actually had a couple of facilities that once you're below that threshold for 2 years, I believe, on the 3rd year, you're no longer required to report. But that was the first onset of regulatory requirements for submitting your greenhouse gas. And, really the intent behind it is to figure out where the U.S. Is with their greenhouse gas emissions. And that inventory really hit the largest contributors for greenhouse gas emissions.
We touched on a little bit about this, especially when I was diving into the scopes again. When we're conducting these footprint analyses, what types of emissions are actually being recorded, and how deep do we dive? Like you said, somebody may voluntarily want to undertake it. Do they go down to, the level of, I've got, 20 employees that have an average commute of like 15 miles and they burn this many gallons of fuel and it generates this much going out their tailpipe. I mean, where does it begin? Where does it end? How do you decide?
We begin with a conversation on, what data that they have available. Scope 1, scope 2, we always, shoot to get those emissions. And for the most part, people that come aboard and come to us are or can obtain that data very easily, or if not, we'll assist them with that. So we really always want to try to make sure that we hit scopes 1 and scope 2. Scope 3 are very selective because more often than not, scope 3 for businesses actually are much larger than your scope 2. The value of the supply chain, employee transportation, it is quite vast. So we work with the facilities to determine which ones we can hone in on. And that is based on, what's measurable, what they feel comfortable in getting reliable data, and what reliable emission rates are out there. So scope 3 is, very selective. And then, before we begin, we also have a conversation with the facility, what's your goal? The intent of this is to figure out where you stand today. And we have a lot of facilities who've been doing it for years, which is awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you know where you stand, you allow yourself to set goals. What are realistic goals? Maybe there are some far-reaching goals, but those far-reaching goals that facilities are setting, they actually are reaching them. So it's really just an intent. You can't set a goal without knowing where you stand today.
Well, and that brings up my next question. What is the goal of determining a given entity's carbon footprint? Why would they want to do this? Let's just say it's somebody that's not required to. Like, I remember we've even done one internally at PW Grocer, right? You had everyone filling out stuff like, what their commute is, who takes the train, how many air flights you take, and all that fun stuff. But why? What's the purpose? Why is this important?
I think it's really a common and unified goal of everyone to reduce environmental impact and, reducing air pollutants. Breathing clean air, no matter which way you look at it, is always a good thing. And in business, becoming more efficient means lowering costs. And over the decades, the realization that, sustainable practices really do lead to lower costs. I think it's a really exciting time and has been. There's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of momentum in the government sector, where we see this movement of policies and, going for the heavy hitters, the tons and the electric and transportation. We also see momentum in businesses. And what I see the goal is really everyone coming together on a personal and business level, really trying to reduce our impact. That's where I see the goal for the businesses that are coming to us and for us internally. Anytime that we can become more efficient and reduce our environmental impact, that's always going to be a positive.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The more we can get out of the atmosphere, and it should be everybody's personal and professional responsibility, because as we've said it before on this show, we only have one Earth, right? There's no planet B, as they say.
There's, I think education is a huge part with all facets of life, especially, I think, with climate change. And I say recently, but a couple years ago, the product 7th generation, that is a principle, philosophy for, decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into our future. So I think everyone is coming together because, as you mentioned, there's no planet B. Let's come together and, anytime we can reduce, as I mentioned, I use it a lot, reduce our impact, it's a good thing. And we're finding in businesses that it's also translating to lowering costs.
And on a marketing perspective, also for a manufacturer, customers like to see that they're hiring or buying a product from a company that is doing their best to be green and environmentally conscientious. It helps. It's a selling
Doreen,
point.
that's a very good point, the whole sustainability aspect. Totally agree. Another topic that we at PW Grocer know a little bit about, carbon neutrality. We're often talking about striving for that. Perhaps some of our listeners aren't as informed on it as we are, but can you ladies explain what it's meant by carbon neutrality, please?
Yeah. Carbon neutrality is defined as the state of balance between anthropogenic or human activity caused and emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and those greenhouse gas emissions being removed. So whatever we're putting out into the atmosphere, we are removing that. So the removal of carbon dioxide can be done through either nature-based technologies like planting trees and forests and maintaining our ecosystems, or through technology-based removals like direct air capture, carbon capturing and sequestering. So that is, carbon neutral where we want to. So whatever our contribution is going into the air, we want to remove those. And what we talk a lot about, with clients, is the hierarchy of mitigating greenhouse gases. And that would be, first we want to try to avoid emissions altogether, right? So if we could find a means to avoid emissions from happening, then you don't have to remove those. Obviously, that's not possible for everyone to do, but the first thing we want to look at is try to avoid. Secondly, then reduce. So by 2050, if we can substantially reduce what's going into the atmosphere, we'll have less to remove it. That's that balance. What we put in, we're going to take out the same amount. Then looking to restoring ecosystems. And then lastly, we would look at offsetting. And carbon neutral, we're really looking at scopes 1 and scope 2.
All right. Well, you brought up some good points, Marie. Like technology-based mitigation. I took a course in my graduate studies was air pollution, right? And we looked at, theoretically, we looked at, like I say, a power plant or a chemical refinery or a fuel type of an oil refinery, where they've got these massive stacks and they've got this, stuff going up the stack and coming out. And how do we control that? It's easy when you have like a point source like that. It's just a stack or a series of stacks that you can capture what's going up and run it through some sort of, as I said, technology, be it a scrubber or maybe a carbon removal system, like some sort of filter. What other technologies are out there to mitigate what's being released to the atmosphere?
With the 1970s oil crisis, there became, an energy revolution. And that's what we're seeing, right now. There's, like I said, a lot of momentum happening. It's fluid and there's moving targets, but we're seeing studies like trying to capture natural gas, from landfills, from farms, and then reusing that. We're a bit away from, like I mentioned, zero emissions. So with the electric sector, they're trying to, really harness on renewable energy sources to reduce that way. And then for other sources like natural gas, what are means that we can capture that and reuse? There are obviously setbacks, with capturing or using renewable natural gas. There's not enough that we can capture to meet demand. The supply and demand plays into everything here, but there's a lot of innovative technologies that are coming to capture. And then just efficiency. So efficient boilers, efficient generators, efficiencies are really assisting with reducing the combustion of fuel. So in many areas, we're seeing momentum of technology driving emissions down.
That's all good stuff. And what about, alternative energy sources? We do a lot of this at PW Grosser also. There's solar, there's wind. The one that's near and dear to us is geothermal. You guys seen a lot of movement with that to help with this, reduce these carbon footprints?
Yeah, I think I briefly mentioned the CLCPA, which is New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And they are trying to decarbonize the electric sector. And they have some pretty amazing, aggressive targets. By 2030, they want 70% renewable energy. So we're looking at a 3,000 megawatt energy storage by 2030, a 9,000 megawatt offshore wind by 2035. They also have a target by 2040 for New York's electric sector to be 100% zero emission. I think they're looking at a 6,000 megawatt for solar. So they've got some aggressive targets, and if we can get there by 2040, I think that would be, an amazing feat that New York has done, and they really have set the precedence for having such aggressive targets.
Impressive, and also the electrification of vehicles. And I know last time I came out and saw you, we were driving around in an electric car, which I'm sure you still have and are still rolling around in. Right?
Yep.
Getting those tailpipes off the road will help too.
I know, and when I spoke about, clean air, definitely have grown accustomed to, no tailpipe emissions, become more sensitive to, the combustion from those tailpipes. It's, like I said, anytime we can, have no emissions, it's a good thing, because it in turn will lead to clean air.
Even the automobile manufacturers, a lot of them are going to be going fully electric in the coming years. No more combustion engines, period. It's going to be interesting to see. I do like my big jacked up truck, but it does spit out a lot of emissions, so we'll see what happens.
That's a momentum happening in New York as well on the transportation sector. As I mentioned earlier, policy goes towards the tons, and the tons are in transportation and electricity. They attribute to over half of the United States greenhouse gases. So by, electrifying vehicles and getting the utilities on renewable energy sources, we can have a huge impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
The thing that's got a lot of people concerned is the charge time and how far I can go on a charge. And I know there's some really, really smart people out there working on this in terms of the battery storage and how quick it can charge these things. And then it's going to be, well, I still can't drive down to Florida. There's no place to stop to fill, to charge, so we've got to work on the infrastructure. And that's a whole nother discussion, but it's probably a good topic for a future podcast, but which I'm looking forward to. But thank you. Also, from a legal perspective, is there legislation in place, federal, state, local, that's driving a reduction of greenhouse gases? I know you mentioned some of it, Marie, which we talked about the CLCPA, correct? But is there anything else? I know there's local law in 97 in New York City and a few others. Can you comment on that for our listeners?
Yes, there's a lot of initiatives. Local Law 97 is New York City. And so that sets emission limits, or metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per square foot, for 10 building categories, for existing buildings that are greater than 25,000 square feet. So this law is actually setting, an emission intensity limit that they must meet by 2024, which is great. We're seeing that on a local level, state level. We talked about CLCPA. On a federal level, we are seeing, so the Office of, and I'll have to remember my acronyms here. We live in a world of acronyms. So
the environmental field, we are loaded with them. Yep, without a doubt.
I know. The Federal Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, that's it. The Federal Department of Health and Human Services established the Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. This was recently established in August of 2021 to address the impact of climate change on human health. So we're seeing this, through, we've had a tremendous amount of costly climate-related disasters in 2020. We broke records on that. Yeah. So this office, is just established to really help mitigate. And I'm not sure what will transpire. We will see. But I think this is, a great office that just established. And, as I mentioned before, there's just so much momentum going, and the race to zero, there's, cities and countries and governments getting on board to this. And this is to meet, carbon neutrality by 2050. And this goal is set in place because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, just released their 6th assessment report. And, we're on a pathway for global temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So in an effort to to prevent that global temperature increase, we are seeing the momentum, the race to zero. Everyone talks about, we have 2030 goals and 2050. And with this race to get to a good point where, we are we're reducing what we're putting in the atmosphere, and we're removing, so we have this balance to try to avoid this increase in global temperature. We're seeing, like I said, there's just so much momentum, but we're seeing a lot of methodologies and guidance trying to align and harmonize, because some clients, reach out to us and some are frustrated. There's just a plethora of information out there and methodologies. So if someone is thinking about doing this and hasn't yet, I would just say not to get overwhelmed with all the information, and to really, it's all about being transparent. And especially when you're doing your greenhouse gases, we work with our clients to make sure that all of our methodologies are stated. And when you are looking for goals, try to reach for those that are attainable for your business. And then also have some kind of far-reaching goals, because we're all working together. Your scope 2 is in line with the electric sector. So as they become more efficient and their greenhouse gas emissions go down, it will in turn, assist you with your scope 2. So I think, all of us coming together in this momentum is going to lead to good change. And I'm optimistic.
Marie, I am too. I'm looking to see a big impact out there sooner rather than later, and hopefully some of these local laws that we just discussed will help move that along faster. You guys seeing any type of, if you're seeing corporations or the like playing a greater role in developing climate-friendly infrastructure like we talked about, or people starting to build these recharging stations for employees to drive to work, or anything else they're doing? What's going on out there?
I haven't seen anything with recharging stations, but yes, we've seen a lot of clients doing fuel switching and installing more efficient equipment, and just paying attention to what's going on to reduce their emissions.
Marie, anything to add on that?
A lot of people have switched to LED lighting. Mm-hmm. There's utilities out there providing, payback programs. Just actually spoke to a facility out here yesterday in the healthcare sector. There's a great payback program here. So there was a lot of money they received back from the LED lighting that they replaced throughout their health system. There's also programs out there, for checking valves, looking at water usage. There's a plethora of programs out there for that give incentive monetary, and then there's kind of incentives out there that are goal related. Goal related being, kind of competition with one another, who can reduce more. There's a lot of really cool, innovative programs that are happening. We have facilities like I mentioned with the vehicles out in Washington, as well as areas in New York. You do see that popping up. What I see a lot of is community drive, which in turn translates, to business. I think it's just kind of catching on with everyone, just unique, innovative ways to help reduce impact. And we see it all the way into food waste, composting. Like I said, there's just a lot of momentum that's happening, and it's an exciting time.
Yeah, Maria, you brought up a couple of things, and we've discussed them in past podcasts, like with the geothermal systems, which are great. They help with the carbon footprint and reduce energy use, and they're efficient, and you save money in the long run operating, but they're expensive to install. But there are tax incentives, and there's also rebates from, say, local utility companies. So that help encourage these types of technologies to get us off the our massive consumption of energy. Especially with geothermal, take you off the burning oil to heat the place. It's great.
Geothermal works, right? We know it works. So if you can use something that's already in place, a well and existing, and I just think that's an exciting technology. But it's kind of like it can either be a bust or it can really save our planet. One or the other.
Well, let's hope the latter. We save this place, right? We only get one shot at this.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both for your time, Marie, Doreen. Excellent. I am again Paul Boyce, CEO and President of PWGC. This is the Environmental Echo. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or thoughts you want to add, you can always reach out to us at our website, pwgrocer.com/podcast. And we look forward to hearing from you guys. And, that's it from us today. That's carbon footprint. Real interesting stuff. And again, thanks, Doreen and Marie. Take care.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.